GCCs are definitely moving beyond scale, and it's really about capability. We hear that from all our clients that cost is no longer the driver. And Sailesh, this morning we've been talking to a couple of clients about that as well. Today we're going to unpick what that means. A, from a talent perspective, B, from a leadership pipeline perspective, as well as the whole digital transformation and AI readiness of the GCC world. Thank you for being with me, Gordon. Welcome to India.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sailesh, for flying to Pune to be in our GCC center in Pune today. I'm going to start with you, Sailesh. Just give us your view as Everest and as an analyst. Where are the biggest shifts that you see in the GCC world today?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift happening from a GCC perspective is the value proposition or the definition of these capability centers changing, right? So the historic context of these shared services captives was that, hey, big enterprises, organizations needed a back office to sort of put their admin and, low cost or let's say highly effort intensive processes in a low cost labor market. That shifted to, going from shared services to capability centers, which were driven by a lot of centers of excellence, a lot of capability building around more high value work. And now that's shifting a lot more towards GICs, right, which is Global Innovation Centers. And essentially, it's gone beyond centers of excellence to what I would like to call as centers of execution. And these are essentially, a lot more high value work. We're talking about not just F&A, HR. We're talking about product. We're talking about engineering, product design. For a lot of semiconductors, it's even, VLSI and ASIC sort of roles. So a lot of this IP creation and really, really high value work is starting to happen within the GCCs, right? So gone are the days where the global mandates used to come to the captives and then people were just executing. Now, it's a collaborative effort happening where teams within the capability centers are actually being a part of the decision making to an extent and then shaping the future of the organization, the product, the value proposition, everything, right? So I think that is the biggest shift happening right now, which is what's driving all the growth and all the activity that we are seeing in a market like India right now.
Right. Absolutely agree. Gordon, from your perspective, and particularly because you talk to a lot of our global clients, what are the conversations as it relates to their GCCs in India or even elsewhere? What are the key drivers? And does that sort of, what Sailesh is saying resonate as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you started by saying it's gone beyond cost. I think it's gone beyond cost on a like-for-like basis.
Right.
Because organizations that have set up GCCs have now seen the ability to kind of push more stuff to them. I think the journey never starts with the global execution center. It starts with the shared service center model. And we're still seeing, kind of like first time GCCs being set up, which follow the same pathway, albeit they follow perhaps in a more rapid evolution. Straight away they've got, the basic F&A, HR, maybe some IT services, but they very quickly get comfortable with it. I think we're also seeing some smaller scale happening.
Right.
In the past, it used to be everyone that had, 10,000 people on an onshore location, and they think we could do this with a big cost arbitrage benefit. I think now we're seeing it with smaller populations because it's a well understood pathway, and organizations can see that they can take that benefit at smaller scale. I think they are also thinking about what that pathway looks like as they go forward and how they evolve rather than just the basics. I think our clients still see India as being a very important market for them. I think we've long got over any reservations about connectivity, infrastructure, albeit it is catching up in many respects. But it's definitely something where the talent pool and the skills and capability that are here are well proven. And I think I've said a few times, I see a really strong interaction between industry and the government and also the education system to make sure that that there's a workforce that's coming out that's capable
Right.
and can move in and deliver the types of services that we're evolving towards wanting to do that are higher skilled rather than just the kind of basic admin replacement services.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree, and I think you both are saying the same thing. I guess as we take the conversation to the next level, it does mean if it's not about cost alone, and it's not also about scale, it's definitely that capability innovation happening. How much of that is process? How much of that is people and other variables that you see in the market? Maybe I'll start with you, Sailesh, on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to put a number on that, right? But generally, the four dimensions that we sort of try to focus on for, I don't know, succeeding in today's world, it's you covered some of the P's, but the four P's we really want to encourage is people, process, platforms, and partnerships, right? So so right now what's happening from a technology perspective is that everybody's getting a little hung up on the process part of things while investing in a lot of platforms. But the partnership piece and the people piece is where, I don't know, there's a bit of disconnect, I would say, that, hey, the digital transformation journey is not really accounting for how roles need to evolve, how job descriptions need to evolve, and how the new way of working looks like for your teams in a new world where maybe, I don't know, 40% of work is automated over the next 3 years. So right now, I think we are seeing a bit of everything that's happening. I mean, there's no single parameter which has exceeded expectations. But the broad narrative in most global organizations is that they're usually focused on a couple of aspects and typically leave behind a few, right? While in the effort to sort of,
Sure.
I don't know, completely overhaul their processes or completely change their platforms, they're not really focusing on the others. So that's the reality of the market right now.
Hopefully they're not leaving the people behind. And that's where I want to pick with you, Gordon, because at AMS we talk about people-powered partnership. Mm-hmm. And as Sailesh was saying, there are the 4 Ps that are important for organizations. Definitely, a process is no good if the people to do that process are not able to cater to the changes. And of course, there's the platform partnership piece, which we'll talk about later. But I want to sort of take that to the next level. And what are you seeing in terms of people, skills, and how is that important in this whole landscape that is shifting?
Yeah. So I think Sailesh's framework of the 4 Ps is really relevant, and I like frameworks as much as Sailesh does. When we talk about the evolution of talent acquisition, for us it's people, process, data, and technology,
Right.
which is only a marginal step sideways from that. The people part and the skills needed are definitely moving up. And I think one of the things that I mentioned earlier about the way in which the education system, universities or whatever, are aligning with what corporates need, it is really helpful in that respect, because it means that graduates, whatever, come into the market with a better understanding of how the businesses actually work, and that's a big accelerator. I think that we're seeing a lot of reskilling within the bases, because if you've got and built a competent GCC where people understand the business that they're supporting, then skilling them up to be able to do high value tasks, it brings all the context with them. It doesn't mean that you're starting from scratch from people who don't understand the business. Because I think one of the things that we definitely would hold out is that you need to understand the business you're supporting.
Right.
If in the olden days of a shared service centre where all you were doing was just, essentially replicating
Right.
a process day after day after day, as we've started to elevate the value add aspects to it, understanding the context of what's in front of you and the task that you're trying to execute becomes more important. So I think that as technology evolves and starts to replace or augment some of the more process tasks, the kind of the people in the process step up and they start being more contextual in what they do, more business aligned and much more of a kind of business partnering rather than shared service centering model. And I think that's a kind of an important evolution. What it does also do is it changes the management dynamic as well.
Sure.
Because no longer are you just managing a productivity output, you're trying to make sure that the content that you're producing is delivering the insights that are needed, in the kind of across the business. So I think that to me is that curve, as well as the maturity curve of what we can do in shared service GCCs, global execution centres. The nature and the skills required has kind of followed that curve up as well.
And where does, in your view, Gordon, staying with you, where does AI fit into this maturity curve?
Yeah. So AI fits in everywhere. It's just when and how. And I think two of the things that I always say to people are, AI is not new. And whether it's machine learning or RPA, it's a variant. What is new is generative AI, and how that's deployed and how we kind of think about having more autonomous processes as opposed to just automated processes.
Sure.
So I think in the first instance there's probably a lot of headway where GCCs can just do more process automation that isn't anything to do with AI. The AI component I think comes in a number of areas. In general, it's better where we're reimagining and re-engineering a process as opposed to just putting something in the middle of what was a manual process. I'm a kind of believer in Sailesh used the word transformation rather than implementation. I think anything to do with AI is a transformation journey rather than implementation. So making sure that we have got a change management mindset around it is probably one of the most important skills. I think secondly, the reimagining how processes can get done in a world where you have, an agentic capability or whatever comes next, and there will be a next, and being continually adaptive, agile, and curious to what's capable, then I think that's important. But I think organisations also can't just, they need to be somewhat planned in how and where they deploy AI and what's the thing that drives most value for them. My kind of belief around that or hypothesis is that they'll drive more value in what their business is as opposed to necessarily in some of their own, making some of their back office functions more, more automated, more agentic. So I think it's a choose your battles, think about what the pathway and what that evolution looks like, and make sure what you do sticks.
Right. So again, I think from a technology lens, yes, that has been happening for many, many years. It started with RPA, then it was digital transformation at enterprise level, and now it's AI first, generative AI, now agentic. Sailesh, from your perspective as an analyst, as well as sort of somebody that really looks at talent acquisition, talent management, where do you see the interplay of that technology skills and how enterprises need to think about the future of workforce?
That's a loaded question. Do we have like an hour?
Yeah.
Just if I can just borrow what Gordon was saying, I think first of all, that intersection is not really like a solid line, right? It's
Sure.
a very fungible, contextual problem to solve for. And to Gordon's point, if I'm a financial services HR or talent acquisition leader, what is high value to me and my team may be different from a peer I have in maybe manufacturing or pharmaceuticals, right? So the interplay is happening across the entire value chain of talent acquisition lifecycle, right? Starting from the planning phase to the onboarding phase and then continuing into the employee lifecycle. So there's obviously there's a lot more focus on the beginning of that process, right? There's a lot more use cases and pilots running in the market around planning, sourcing, screening, right? All the things that tie up recruiters a lot more and are a lot more, let's say, effort intensive in general, right? Scheduling, and I mean, a recruiter on average may spend hours trying to find time with a candidate because the candidate is a consulting person who works insane hours, but the hiring manager is only available, let's say, in the first half of every day, right? So those sort of coordination based manual heavy tasks are what's getting targeted first, and then AI is slowly moving up the value chain, right? So I think that contextualization is important for
Sure.
whatever in enterprise it may be, that hey, you really need to run a, I don't know, diagnostic to understand what's low value, and then out of those low value tasks, which are the one which are easily automated first and where you can deploy something quick and at scale, right? So it's an experiment at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and if I was to kind of double click on that, as we talk to our talent acquisition leaders
Yeah.
or even CHROs, as they think about their executives really talking about, let's get some AI in, let's get some AI into the HR processes, into the talent processes. Have you seen some successes there that companies, enterprises should be thinking about now?
There's a few unique case studies that we have come across, and they are largely the innovation factor, the success factor in those case studies is largely revolving around bringing down or actually compressing the volume of applications or the volume of work that recruiters need to do, and really using autonomous systems to sort of, I don't know, process information much faster than a recruiter would do, right? So let's take an example of an organization. So there was this healthcare organization in the US who opened a role, right? Some mid-management corporate function role. And I think they had like some 4,000 odd applicants for that within 48 hours. And if a recruiter or a team of recruiters start going through those 4,000 applicants, that's going to take days, right? So the effort was to, hey, can we have a summary of each candidate, sort of do like a quick analysis of whether they fit, whether they don't, just do like a, let's call it diagnostic on each candidate, and then just start filtering them out, right, on basis on that rubric that we created. So they really brought it down. The turnaround time was much faster than that they expected, right? And similarly in Asia Pac, in India particularly, I know a few large corporate houses, right, which are operating with some much newer tools in the market, and they have actually created completely automated workflows for intake to screening, right? So that the hiring managers are, let's say, meeting more relevant candidates,
Sure.
right? And the recruiters are spending less time on, the initial screening and the scoping and making sure that the candidates fit. So yeah, so there's some promising case studies, but then the note here is that most of it is pilot, right? It's still experimentative, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't come out and call it out all-round success yet, because it's great, we are doing this in a controlled environment, maybe for one business unit, maybe for like one location, and it's working fantastic. But till these interventions don't operate at scale and for a large period of time, the jury is still out on
Right.
a success.
And we at AMS talk a lot about this, that it's great to have technology, but really we need to think about what's the problem that we're looking to solve. So in that whole screening piece, there's definitely a clear problem, because where, candidates are using AI left, right, and center, we could have some experimentation there. But it could also be quite maddening if a JD is written by AI, the candidate is using AI to apply for the job using that JD, and then we start to use AI to kind of screen that. Do you think systems are moving beyond that yet?
So I think it's interesting. Is my IA as a candidate better than your AI as a corporate? And I have a relatively simplistic view of that, which is it's an uneven war, because candidates have no constraints on how they use AI.
Right.
Most responsible corporates are dealing with cybersecurity, in Europe, the EU AI Act, GDPR issues, ethics, compliance, and particularly when you move into regulated industries, all kinds of of no-go areas, as well as also brand reputation.
Of course.
You know, certainly some of our clients, who are some of the world's biggest brands, would run a mile if anything's going to appear in the front page of the press that's a bad experience caused by some agentic process or technology. So I think it's to Sailesh's point. There's safe steps where you're absolutely just taking away or replicating a process that a recruiter or a sourcer would previously have to spend a lot of time going through. But then you get to the point of where do you need the human intervention, and you need human intervention around points of empathy and trust. People changing jobs is one of the biggest decisions they make in their life.
Right.
So it's not something that they'll do lightly, and it's unlikely that an AI agent will convince them to come to, be interested in a role if they're not going to kind of bite on that, whatever the attraction mechanism is. And I think it's trying to work out what are those points in the process, because frankly, I think our view of what we do for clients is that we don't want to be having to create a cost for a client if we can automate something, and the outcome we get from automation is as good as what we would do if we were spending man hours on it. But similarly, when we think about the outcomes that we're trying to create, and we engineer back from that and think about, okay, how does it work? I've been trying to think about how could you engineer a process end to end that's got no human intervention in it. And you can, for the one or two use cases where it goes straight through and there's nothing goes wrong, there's no need to create conviction or confidence or empathy or buy-in. But almost every process and every case we look at, there's a need for that human in the loop or the human in control. Right. to create that bit of outcome that benefits everyone.
Absolutely. I'm going to sort of change gears slightly and taking all the things that we've been talking about so far, the GCC growth, the changing geopolitical environment forever. I think you called it permanent crisis.
Burma crisis.
Burma crisis this morning, Sailesh. Skills, AI, and businesses that need to continuously change. And AI is just one part of the need to change. There are all other things that are happening. What do you think about talent orchestration almost as a layer, as a framework? Tell us a little bit about, how do you see it in simplistic terms? And then Gordon, I'd love to hear about how you think AMS is adopting talent orchestration as well.
Sure. At the core, again, it comes back to the lovely 4P framework, right? So, orchestration is not about just building the 4Ps up and, having best practices plugged in. The 4Ps are the enablement layer of true orchestration, right? Like, unless you have these 4 things in place, which is, processes which are re-engineered to deal with the changes that your platforms are bringing in, people who are trained and who are capable to deal with these new processes, these new platforms, and then partnerships which enable, which are filling the gaps that are left, which may not be covered by your people and your processes. These 4 things in tandem will enable you to work as an orchestrated organization. So that means that when we talk about talent orchestration, we are talking about everything coming together. We are talking about your permanent hiring also sort of correlating to your contingent workforce. We are talking about your talent acquisition to an extent, sort of aligning with your talent development goals and your talent management goals. We are talking about, your plan or your workforce planning exercise to make sense not just for the next 1 year, but at least attempt to demystify, let's say, the next 3 years, right? That, hey, the pace at which skills are changing and disappearing right now in the market, it's unprecedented, right? So orchestration essentially is making sure that, let's call it, everybody is talking to everyone. Be it a process talking to a process, be it a stakeholder talking to a stakeholder, or be it platforms talking to each other, making sure that data is bidirectionally visible. So that's what orchestration is at its core, right? And the 4 Ps that we're talking about, those are the 4 things you need to make sure are progressing along to reach that North Star metric without leaving anything behind, right? That's sort of the, I would say, basic idea that we are sort of advocating for.
And is that already starting to be real in the GCC world, particularly in India? Do you see that yet?
To be candid, maybe not as much as I would like, right? I think, I don't know the word for it, but maybe one of the symptoms we see in the GCC space is that a lot of the best practices, a lot of the, the orchestration mindset does get driven from global stakeholders and global mandates, right? Like I said, for a long time, GCCs have focused on executing the mandates they have received rather than designing or advocating for their own mandates, right? That's a mindset, that's a gap that has existed.
And both ways, right?
Both ways.
Because it's the GCCs as well as the headquarters
Sure.
that started.
Yeah. So you need a seat at the table, but then they need to take you seriously as well when you do that, right? So it goes both ways. But I believe it's only a very small fraction of the global capability centers who are thinking in the next generation aspect of how talent and sort of workforce operates over the next 3 to 5 years. Most, I think, are still, I would say, firefighting continuously, right? Whether that's in terms of filling headcounts, or whether that's in terms of ensuring retention metrics are up, whether that's in terms of, I don't know, filling these high value roles which are starting to come to India, right? So whether it's in terms of high value skills or the seniority of roles that are starting to now pop up in the GCCs, right? So that perma crisis piece is real because there's, like you said, the political aspect of things, the geopolitics, the economics, right? So there's markets are volatile right now. Investor pressure is real. There's board mandates. There's executive mandates. There's digital transformation mandates. There's just so many things to deal with, right? So it's just that I think the GCCs haven't had the time to sort of breathe and really think it through. So everybody is still, I feel, they're thinking about the next 12 to 18 months only, rather than thinking about the next sort of 36 months, the next 3 years, right? How do they potentially look like and what can they do to prepare themselves as well as the global organization for that next reality that's coming in. So I think that's the current reality, at least from my perspective.
Gordon, just taking that thought, clearly our clients are telling us we need to do something differently. Is there a piece that as AMS we can support the clients, particularly that are not that mature in this journey?
Yeah, I think the journey to talent orchestration has got some structural barriers in it, and the structural barriers are different in different industries and different geographies. So if you go for the one that's probably the easiest to solve, which is within corporates and organisations, the different types of engaging talent are owned by different people. HR will own perm recruiting. Procurement probably owns contingent labour. Grad recruiting could be owned anywhere in the organisation. Recruit, train, deploy generally sits in a business unit. Resource augmentation, probably HR again. And then, increasingly what we also bring to discussions with clients is when you decide whether a role should be done by an agent or done by a human. And it could be that part of a role should be done by an agent and part of it's a human, but each of these decisions are owned by different people. Then you hit the kind of the country structural issue in terms of what's an acceptable mode of employment. We were talking earlier about the contingent labour market in India is still relatively underdeveloped, whereas in the US, the figures that we see is that 50% of the labour force will be contingent labour by 2030. And then throw into that statement of work, and there's just a lot of different component parts that structurally aren't aligned to facilitate total talent orchestration. Now, what we have seen in the market is a number of corporates coming to market looking for total talent solutions, But really what they mean is they just want a single supplier for perm, for contingent, for grad. But it's a different buying centre that each one of them engages with. So the procurement process that you go through becomes quite extended because there's many more stakeholders to get on board. Now, if you could remove that, then I think it comes down to how and what is the triage mechanism that you use when you define or see a role that needs to be executed against. And jobs are funny things. A job is really just an amalgamation of tasks. And Joe Feely, I think you've probably had this discussion with Joe, who's our Chief Innovation Officer. There could be a future where jobs don't exist and it's tasks that exist, and people own tasks, right. But the configuration of how the tasks fit together may be fundamentally different from what job types look like today because of the component parts that can be done through AI or other technology. So my own belief is that we're probably, a bit away from talent orchestration in its, kind of purest form actually happens. I think we are seeing some points to my corporate structure thing. We're seeing quite a lot of the management of contingent labour programs moving from procurement to HR, not necessarily to TA, but under the CHRO's office, which starts to kind of allow for some of that more, let's call it agile workforce planning. So I think, to me, before you get to talent orchestration, you probably get to agile workforce planning.
Sure. I'm going to start wrapping up. So what is the one thing that GCC leaders should think about that they can do in the next 6 months to start sort of planning for this, changes that are constant, so that they can take a seat at the board rather than just being taking on, mandates that come from the board or from business. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, maybe 6 months is a short period of time. Maybe, let's say over the next over the next year or so. We're still not that deep into 2026, right? So, I think right now I would say the biggest advice is a mindset shift, right? So, going away from being a cost arbitrage center or just being like a process expert that supports the global mandate, going away from that to truly being an innovator within the organization, to being the experts of transformation, right? That is what GCC leaders, not just TA, HR leaders, but the business leaders, the GCC heads, I think that mindset shift is very, very important, because as you reimagine the role that your GCC can play for the broader global business, you can also start thinking about what that operating model looks like. Sure, you have had an operating model that has existed for maybe a decade now. You've operated in a certain way, but that need not be how you operate going forward. And right now it's all a white piece of paper, right? Anybody can think of anything and then try to run with it, experiment with it, as long as you're able to convince your leadership. So I feel like sort of taking that mindset shift into account, trying to reimagine what the role of your GCC organization looks like over the next 3 years. Let's not talk 5 years, right? 5 years is, it's a big timeline. It's very disruptive. So over the next 3 years, what do you think the GCC looks like? What mandates can you handle without them coming, right? What mandates can you proactively position in front of your global business that, hey, this is what we're going to take up. This is how we're going to do things differently and run things differently. I think that would be the one key thing I would like GCC leaders to focus on over the next year or so.
Right. I think that's super powerful, because what they could start to do is work in their own environment, but be more consultative. Almost take the supply first and then generate demand instead of being on the back foot all the time.
And just one thing to clarify, this is we're not saying that nobody is doing it,
right?
But this is sort of the general sentiment in the market, right? This is how GCCs continue to be observed or continue to be perceived as. So obviously there are organizations who are ahead of the curve, but then it will take some time for everybody to catch up to that.
Sure.
Right. So that's where the generality of the market is that, hey, there's still this mindset of, hey, lack of mindset of, what can we do differently and better going forward, right? So.
Gordon, same question for you.
Yeah, I think I would echo all of that, and I think part of it is how do we get the GCCs to move their mindset to stop being fulfillment centres? How do they become more part of the whole business system of the organisation? I think there is opportunities to experiment, try proof of concept. They'll always be fighting for the investment to be made in them, because back to a comment I made earlier that I think the bigger ROI for most corporates is in what's their core business rather than what's their their, for want of a term, back office processes. I think that the leadership within the GCCs need to start thinking about how they're going to adapt to the future, how they're going to think about the skill sets that they need to fulfill and be successful in a different world where the technology starts to play more of a part in the process as opposed to just being a tool in the process. And I think also not to be drawn in by promises that are unproven. I think there's a lot of product appearing out in the market, which is has it been tested to enterprise grade? Probably not. Is it security compliant, cyber compliant, SOC compliant? Probably not. And I think there's a journey there that I think a lot of large corporates, in particular large enterprises, will have a degree of caution around engaging with. So it's still trying to think about how do I re-engineer processes in a world where there are alternatives to people doing them, but being very clear where you need that human in the loop. And our whole people-powered partnership is partnered with everyone. It's partnered with how technology works. It's partnered with how clients work. It's partnered within our own teams and our organisation. But I think to me that's the key. How do you get that blend of human empathy, context, cultural connection to be blended with how you use technology to drive better outcomes overall?
Great, thank you. So I think if I was to summarize, we talked about so many things where we started to look at GCCs kind of really becoming a capability center. But then we moved into talent orchestration, we spoke about AI. But one thing is clear, there isn't a playbook ready. And as TA leaders, as business owners, if there's one thing that we need to do is to be comfortable with that there isn't a playbook, but we can experiment, we can continue to look at various frameworks and be a part of the evolution. And I typically, the way I think about and I'm going to forget the term again, but it's perma crisis, is to learn to sort of dance in the fire and do it well.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.